The story takes place in America during a very significant hardship of this country and describes the civil rights movement. The principal conflict of this narrative, a man murders a black man, in which he believes would do him and other people of his community a good deed, but in real life brought the movement on even stronger. The piece describes the murder of a black man by a white man due to the racial tension in America during the period of time. The style of this narrative is prose and is organized as a flow of consciousness. Where's the voice coming from is told in a first person narrative by the killer, who gave details of his thoughts and feelings before, during, and after he committed the crime. The protagonist is an anonymous speaker. The voice from the title reveals his inner thoughts in a stream of consciousness monologue. The narrator recalls recent conversations with his wife as well as his role in the death of Roland Summers, an African American civil rights leader in the small town of Thermopylae. The story consists of thoughts and recollections, and the only real action happens in the end when the speaker begins to play his guitar. It occurs to him that killing another black man would solve all his problems, do him and other people of his race a good deed, but and that he would not have to deal with this situation any longer. He is deeply mistaken in his thoughts and does the assassination, as he says, for his own pure satisfaction. Protagonist speaks contemptuously of the black people and looks down on the Afro Americans without contempt, sincerely despising them. The killer expresses how he is tired of people better than he is, especially black men. Also, he is unsatisfied with his life altogether and shows the feeling of depression. The language of this story shows the protagonist as an illiterate, narrow minded, and uneducated person. It has plenty of offensive words, such as nigger, colloquialisms, and ungrammatical, illiterate structures, double negations, he don't deliver nothing, wrong verb grammar tense use, I ain't saying, note, contracted forms, and fella. Theme of this piece is racism in America in those times, 1916s, as the hatred of white people to the Afro Americans. The author employs similes in depth description, like the wings of the bird spread on his back, like a man under bed claws, and lust like blood could weigh a ton. The imagery devices include tactile, temperature, and heat. Weather plays a big role in the story and creates the mood of hatred, anger, bitterness, and dissatisfaction. When he mentions everything is being hot, on fire, scorching, streaming sweat. Visual, the green grass, lights, and road signs. The nigger wife of his, she wanted nice grass. I bet my wife would hate to pay her water bill. He shows how he hates them, how different they are from them. The auditory sound of television and the sound of wheels. The imagery makes the piece real in the reader's eyes and tells the reader how hard his depression is. And that he even talks about the grass and how rich the Afro Americans are, that they pay the bills for water. The metaphor. A ton load of bricks on his back wouldn't have laid any heavier. It means the black man fell dead on the driveway after the protagonist shot him. The railroad meat, not the electric chair, and what they amount to is something hotter than yesterday and today put together. He thinks they will punish him for his deed, and he is ready to sacrifice his life for the good of the country. Suspense thriller. The story takes place in Jamaica, with coconut palm trees. It starts outside the hotel, under a yellow umbrella by the swimming pool. It's 6 o'clock in early evening. The wind was blowing in the treetops, and the sun was shining. The reader seemed to sit comfortably and watch the witness the events. The conflict lies in the resolution of the bed between the two main characters. The conflict is relational, that retraces the emotional fight between the two men. The protagonist is a small oldish man, immaculately dressed in a white suit named Carlos, and the antagonist is the American sailor, presumably Cadet. He was about 19 or 20, with a long freckled face and with a rather sharp bird-like nose. Written in a first-person narrative, the author becomes one of the characters involved as a referee. The rise in action happens steadily and constantly, and its chain of little riddles and deep presumptions sound very sinister, the way it always goes in suspense thrillers. The style of the narration is informal and colloquial, which managed to create a very specific mood from absolutely relaxing at the beginning to feeling tension at the climax. The big idea of this piece lies in the imperfection of human nature. The protagonist succeeds in deceiving the antagonist, the American cadet, who completely relies on what he is told. The cadet is tempted by getting something unaffordable for him. The boy fails to balance the perspective for gain and loss by getting sucked in with the idea to win the incredible bet. Author does not provide a lot of similes, but he gives plenty of metaphors. Here are some examples of sound metaphors. Accent was Italian or Spanish, but I felt fairly sure he was some sort of a South American. Is that, you say, one moment, please, and so on. The wind was blowing strongly through the tops of the palm trees, making the leaves hiss and crackle as though they were on fire. The author gives a lot of visual metaphors. All in all, the story looks like a screenplay, so that we can almost witness the course of events. The story looks like a movie. He was about 19 or 20, with a long freckled face and rather sharp bird-like nose. His chest was not very sunburned, and there were freckles there too, and a few wisps of pale reddish hair. This is the description of the tension in the boy was beginning to build up inside him. Then he started shifting about in his seat and rubbing his chest and stroking the back of his neck, and finally he placed both hands on his knees and began tapping his fingers against his kneecaps. Soon he was tapping with one of his feet as well. The foreshadowing of this story is the idea of cutting someone's finger off, and is repeated several times. Then he produced a knife with which had a small scissors in it, and he snipped the end of the cigar. I chopped it off. I should tie one of your hands to the table before we started, and I should stand there with a knife ready to chop the moment your lighter missed. Stood behind the table with the chopper in his hand. He lifted the chopper up in the air and held it in there about 2 feet above the boy's finger, ready to chop. Set in the 19th century St. Petersburg's a cold Russian winter, the protagonist Akaki Akakievich one day realizes that his winter overcoat has become worn out. He takes it to the tailor, but unfortunately is told that his piece of clothing is inseparable and has to buy a new one. He struggles to save money for a new one and suffers great deprivation. During the rise of action, the overcoat begins to make a central role in his life, and he begins to view the garment as the key to his future happiness. After Akaki finally gets his overcoat, it is being stolen. His numerous calls for help and justice are unheard. He falls into a fever and dies. After his tragic death, a ghost resembling Akaki inhabits the city stealing overcoats. Written in a first-person narrative, Gogol uses a simply straightforward style of prose, presenting a story of a common man. Drawing his portrait as a simple, hard-working Akaki, Gogol manages to symbolize the cloak as his home country, that has worn out, suffering hunger, cold, indignity, and poverty. The new overcoat that Akaki earns by hard work represents warmth, acceptance, prosperity. And when Akaki is robbed of the overcoat, he was robbed of everything that matters in his life. The theme of this piece is how lonely is the little man and how is he oppressed by the system. The climax occurs when poor Akaki Bashmachkin falls ill and dies, so it's not the end of the story. His ghost comes and takes overcoats from those who oppressed him, and his soul finally finds peace after he gets the revenge and takes the overcoat from the prominent personage. The irony of this piece is greatly shown. For example, he chose the best cat for the fur collar along with the best clothes and linen. This shows how hard it was for him. He didn't have so much money for a new overcoat, but he tried to choose all the best that he could. So powerful is sometimes a good soldier. The metaphor. The metaphor used to create the gloomy mood in the story. Deserted streets, dim and lonely, not a soul anywhere. The Samael showed in this piece is his neck was like the necks of those plastic cats which wag their heads.